Welcome to the Kennedy Events Podcast, where we feature top marketing, communications, and future of work leaders and share their biggest takeaways and insights. We love these conversations and hope you will too. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Kennedy Events Podcast. I'm your host, Paige Buck. Past guests of ours include Julie Liu of AvePoint, Russell Benaroya of Stride, and Kim Alpert of Udemy. With me today is Erika Pichardo-Ley of Cápita Works. Erika is the head of client relations, a trusted source for high-performing virtual assistants in Mexico. She's an enthusiastic and goal-oriented leader with a passion for business management, law, and behavioral economics. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by Kennedy Events. Let's face it, events are stressful, time-consuming, and expensive, which can make you feel exhausted and set up for failure before you've even begun. Kennedy Events provides expert management and design for all your corporate event needs, from in-person to hybrid and virtual, and our proven process makes this experience stress-free and even fun, freeing you up to focus on your marketing, sales enablement, and leadership priorities. You can learn more about us at kennedyevents.com. Hi, Erika.
Hi, Paige. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really glad to have you here. And thanks for letting me blab on at the beginning there. Tell me about Cápita Works and how you guys got started.
So Cápita Works is a trusted resource for full-time virtual assistants in Mexico. And the way we got started was really as a strategic solution to the challenge that many entrepreneurs were facing at the start of the pandemic. So our CEO, Adrian, he has a larger consulting group that has been around for 11, 12 years. And some of his clients there started contacting him about hiring people in Mexico without having essentially to create a legal entity in Mexico. And that's really how it got started. A lot of our top clients now started hiring because they had to essentially let go some of their local employees due to the pandemic, but kind of keep operations going. So it's been up and up since there.
Wow. I don't think I'd realized how relatively new you were, and you're like a little pandemic baby.
We are a pandemic baby, yeah. So our business has totally been, the epitome of the pandemic maybe is, they go out and socialize and they're kind of scared of all the things that are around them. We're totally a pandemic baby.
So I remember one of my early questions when I learned about you and your services were, are folks paid a living wage? And what does that look like? And what sort of band will they fall into economically, because I don't want to make hires and take economic advantage of somebody. And I was delighted to learn some of what you can expect. Tell me a little bit about that.
Definitely. So I'd say one of the main reasons we have been successful and continue to grow is because our purpose advantage for both our clients and the employees working for our clients is the same: to provide an opportunity and to provide a solution. So in approaching things this way, we have truly been able to offer very competitive wages above minimum wage. We are competing against a lot of international companies that are also in Mexico with great salaries. But again, our purpose advantage is to provide this opportunity for people in Mexico to work for international companies in the US. So employees have very competitive salaries, all the benefits. They're really, really well taken care of. And again, I think that's what has really led to our growth.
Your appeal to your prospects. That's great.
Yeah.
What were some of the early days, especially during the pandemic, and what were some milestones or hurdles you faced?
Early days were filled with EOS sessions. Mm-hmm. So we run on EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. Adrian used to be an implementer, so our early days, I want to say our first few months, we had a few clients already, but we really needed to get the base, the structure, the processes. So early days were purely getting all of that set up. And the pandemic, in the beginning, we actually did have an office. We had a pretty big office here in Tijuana on the border with San Diego. So employees were working in person, and there came a point where, that was no longer a possibility. So in the beginning, it was kind of figuring out how long we would be working from home and, kind of navigating the waters of everything, as I think as a lot of businesses were.
So was this your first experience with EOS? And I know a little bit about it. Maggie and I sort of run Kennedy events on our own little cherry picked version of it. We haven't hired an implementer and really, we're not really running to it, but I can only imagine what it's like to start from an amazing set of tools like that.
It was amazing. It was very helpful, and it was a very small team in the beginning. I mean, we're still a relatively small team, but when we started, even smaller, but it pushed all of us outside our comfort zone. And I think that was amazing to start with.
Can you share a particular, one or two, particular EOS practices that really resonate for you on helping you guys up level?
Definitely. I think the two main practices that have helped us are the level 10 meetings, the weekly 90-minute meetings that you cannot reschedule for absolutely any reason. That has been incredibly helpful with our leadership team, just to keep everybody on the same schedule, accountable. We know what's happening. We follow a very strict agenda. So that has been very helpful. And then our rocks, our 90-day goals, have also been really helpful in creating accountability within the team.
Yeah, fantastic. I know that those stand out to me as well as but they're scary at first, right? They're that sounds like a big leap or too much rigor, too much structure.
I will say it is structure, it is rigor, but like I said, the ultimate goal is, at least for us, it's accountability. And I mean, especially when we're all working from home, it's accountability. And those two things have really helped us create that sort of culture of accountability.
Nice. Tell me more about you. What were you doing before Cápita Works? How did you come into this?
That is a great question. So I was actually working in Big Law in New York prior to coming onto Cápita Works. It was, I think many people might resonate with my story, but we were in the middle of a pandemic. I had to come back to Mexico. So I left my job in Big Law in New York, came to Mexico, and Adrian is actually my neighbor, which is very funny, and I think it's fate. I didn't meet him prior to working at Cápita Works, but I knew of his companies. I knew of the consulting group. So I applied to a job at the consulting group, and I'm glad that I ended up at Cápita Works because it has been an incredible experience. So that's kind of how I ended up here. Had a couple interviews, a soft skills assessment, and then it's been, up and up from there.
Nice. Can you share a mistake you or the organization made early that you've learned a lot from?
Yes, I think, and this also goes with EOS, just putting the right people in the right seat was definitely a mistake we made early on. And perhaps along the same lines, giving the wrong people too many opportunities, I would say.
Oh, gosh. I know. Sometimes we're like, wow, work would be so much easier if people weren't involved. And yet our organizations run on people. It's a necessary, you just got to get up and through. I've heard it said that in an EOS implementation, you could expect the first besides all the other like rigor and structure you're describing, you can expect like the first year or two to be fixing where you don't have the right seats defined and where you don't have the right people in the right seats. And so that sounds like a common challenge, and I certainly recognize that myself.
I mean, we're approaching barely our third year. So we're still, I mean, it's still trial and error, and we can still talk about the same mistakes of, where we might have to restructure the sales department and the marketing department. So it's a constant restructuring.
I'm glad to hear that. I think it's a like further up the spiral staircase. Somebody said, like you get around and you're like, oh, look, the same problem again. But we're doing better than we were. It's just a different view of the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Who would you say are some of yours or even Adrian's mentors?
Ooh, I would say my biggest mentors through this whole experience and growing Cápita Works and growing with Cápita Works have been Adrian. He's an incredible entrepreneur, and I have learned so much from him. And my own family, my whole family, they're all entrepreneurs, coffee shops, restaurants, law firms, etc. So I think those two have been my biggest mentors.
I love that you're surrounded by entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it's awesome. Incredible.
Was that, did you use one another as sounding boards, especially during the pandemic?
Yes and no. We were all facing different struggles. So I would say I used my family of entrepreneurs as sounding boards when it came the people issue that we were facing, but not necessarily, I want to say, like the processes issue that we were facing or kind of the structuring of the company. I really relied more on Adrian, and I'm sure he relied on his network and his partners and his other businesses to kind of get this started. So yes and no.
Nice. Now I know like your little elevator pitch or soundbite really hits strongly on providing virtual assistants, but you have a whole huge like range of types of positions you can fill. And I was super curious, and it was sort of aspirational when I learned that you have larger engagements. What are some of those, like you're not just one executive assistant to the CEO here or one virtual assistant to the marketing team here? Tell me what some of those larger engagements look like.
So I can pinpoint two of the larger engagements, and these two specific clients are in very different industries. One of them is luxury wood flooring. The other one is an immigration law firm. They're both in San Diego, so that is wonderful. And they both have over 10 employees. And
10 employees through Cápita Works.
Through us, yes. Through us. So their teams are even larger with the local folks that they have hired, I'm sure. And through the luxury wood flooring company, we have been able to find a great team of customer service reps, and they have done wonders, not only in being able to grow their business, but in training the employees. So I would say that is a great case study of a relationship that has really worked out on both ends. So they have hired customer service reps, logistics people, operations supervisors, accountants. So it's really been a fruitful relationship. And the immigration law firm has hired paralegals, legal assistants, intake specialists, customer service reps, assistants, marketing people, really all across the board.
And so then they even have, through you, team leads or managers of other folks underneath them.
That's right. Them too, I know, definitely have people that are that the employees that are hired through us are managing. And aside from these two clients, I know a lot of our clients do that as well. Yeah.
Do you have any tips or well, I could unpack a whole bunch of things here. I'm super curious about your observations that you would share with clients about best practices for accountability again. And I know you could come back to EOS, but for accountability and capacity and understanding workload when you're working remotely with somebody.
That is another great question. And I get asked that probably in every discovery call that I have with a prospect. Like, what are some best practices? And I would say my top advice is to have a clear idea and understanding of your needs. Not necessarily go into hiring, whether it's an admin assistant or any other role, not go into it kind of, oh, I need help. I'm just going to hire somebody and figure it out. But take the time to understand what that will look like on your end for training purposes, or what you can actually delegate, and kind of create this list and then move on to the process itself and kind of get started. That is my biggest tip. That and having a proper onboarding in place.
Mm-hmm.
Like knowing what the first month is going to look like, the first 3 months are going to look like, the 6 months, what all of that is going to look like has been very, very helpful.
Yeah. I think those are all really critical. And then day to day, I mean, I know you're on Pacific time as we are. But you have within Mexico, you also have people across the same time zones. I think do you even have one that's like, do you have a further east time zone than we do? No, maybe not.
No.
Yeah. So you have 3 or 4 time zones within Mexico. You can, I imagine, with a combination of factors, face a lot of like making choices about synchronous work, like when do we meet and do this stuff together, and asynchronous work where you're popping things back and forth. What have you found works well for collaborating or getting things from folks that when you're doing it asynchronously?
Ooh. I think it goes back to the same thing I mentioned, just having a clear understanding and list of priority and expectations. I will say, when it comes to the employees that are hired through us for our clients, for the most part, the employees work on our clients' time zone.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that has been a huge benefit to our clients. But again, it's all with being transparent about what our client expects from the employee. So I think that has been the most helpful.
Yeah. I still think some of that comes into play just by virtue of remote work. Like we might all be working in the same time zone, but you're picking up your child from school and you came back and I'm offline taking my dog for a walk, and we're pinging each other, and then we're not like huddling. We're struggling with this as a team too, and testing out some new things. So
yeah. And I really think it's all about, I mean, I hate to say it because we have all heard it so many times, but it's really about communication.
Mm-hmm.
And, you're not in an office where you can say, hey, I'm going to eat, or, hey, I need to do this. I need to take a break and go on a quick walk. But, it's still keeping that communication and sending them a message on Slack and being like, hey guys, I need to eat. I'll be right back. So things like that, I'd say, have been very helpful. I know for our internal team, and I know a lot of our clients have done the same.
As a pandemic baby, like the future of work looks so different than it did pre-pandemic. What other, if you were like looking out, what other trends do you see as opportunities or challenges for Cápita Works, for the future of work in general?
What I have seen most recently, and from the research we've done, I'd say in the last 2 to 3 months, is that it seems like in the US, the Great Resignation isn't slowing down. So more and more people are continuing to quit their jobs, whether that is to travel the world for a year and then figure life out, or because of changing priorities, or they want more flexibility, or they're looking for another job, etc. So I think because that looks like it'll continue to be an issue, in turn, we will continue to grow. So I'm really hoping that will be the case, because we can provide more opportunities for people here and solutions for US companies that I know are struggling with hiring. So yeah.
As this happens here, is there like a knock-on effect? Is there more, maybe not at the same level, but is there more job movement in Mexico as well?
Yes, definitely. So, and I'd say it has been a direct effect of the Great Resignation, and companies in Canada and the US having to hire from Mexico because they can't find people in the US or Canada. So we have definitely started seeing kind of the Great Resignation coming here. Hopefully not to the extent that it's happening in the US, but we have seen it, yeah. A lot more competition, a lot higher salaries. So yeah.
Where do you go for some of these like insights or research to kind of keep your eye on things?
I read the report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics every
Oh,
month. So
wow.
I love reading it. And I also go on Manpower Group and Forbes. So for all of that info, I check it every month. And on the Mexican side, just a ton of articles, and in our own experience too, just interviewing candidates and seeing what the market looks like and how we can become even more competitive. So those are, I think, the resources on both sides.
So sort of listening for trends underneath every conversation you're having, in addition to like doing some wonky reading every month.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fascinating. That's fascinating. Do you have like podcasts or books that you look to as well? Or I mean, books aren't going to be as on the pulse, but
Yeah, not books. I read a lot on behavioral economics because I love understanding why people decide what they decide and why we keep making the same mistakes. And I think it's all related to everything. So I think that part's very interesting. That's what I go to books for. And podcasts, sometimes I listen to the most relevant podcasts from NPR that
Mhm.
apply to these sort of things. Yeah.
So, like if Planet Money has a labor or resignation trend topic, then you're going to dive into that.
Yeah, definitely. And also podcasts. I mean, I can't think of them right now, but also podcasts that talk about how to engage with your employees in this remote culture. Because although we've been doing, everything remotely for more than 2 years now, it's super helpful to understand how other companies are doing things and evolving, etc. So that aspect has been helpful as well.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, we were virtual before most folks. We were remote even within just the Bay Area, each
Mhm.
working from home and meeting together collaboratively once a week or less, especially during busy seasons. And so at first we were like leading the pack and people were looking to us for insights, even baseline things that you and I would take for granted. Like, well, but then who opens the bills in the mail? And I was like, no, you have those come in digitally. What are you talking about? Really, like things that seem obvious to us 3 years ago are now everyone's there. And much larger and more sophisticated enterprises are asking themselves these same questions. So there's a lot of
Oh yeah.
opportunity to learn.
And
Yeah.
definitely, and I think it's really all a matter of adapting to the current situation. I mean, Zoom has been around for years,
Yeah.
and it was a lifesaver during the pandemic, but it has been around. Now it's just a matter of adapting and trial and error and just going through the motion.
Yeah. Outside of Zoom, what are some of your favorite? I mean, it's hard to say favorite. It might be like necessary but loathed tech tools.
So we use WhatsApp for very quick communication with our internal team. and then Slack as well for communication with all of our clients' employees. So those two have been very, very helpful. Yeah.
It's
So
great.
Zoom, WhatsApp, and Slack.
And Slack is actually somebody, like, as an organization, I listen to for future of work trends, because they're evolving and developing their tools. And I have a friend who works there who tells me what some of the things are that are in development. And that invites me to think differently about getting more either from the tool or from another way we talk together as a team. And I love that. So
Oh, that's interesting.
I like nerd out on those sorts of conversations. Yeah.
I love it.
What do you mentioned, and I'm fascinated by this, that you guys are now taking on like C-level headhunting positions.
Yeah. So one of our core values is that we're constantly evolving, and we have really done that. So, our clients need new solutions to their problems, and we're there to offer those solutions. And one of them was being able to support our clients through headhunting C-level execs. And we've done that in the US. So we've been able to provide these services to find people in the US, but also in the rest of the world. So we've done headhunting in all of Latin America and the US. Yeah.
Nice. And I'm curious, since I'm thinking back about like the EOS tools, I know that like documenting core processes is a big part of success. We are trying to like reverse engineer that where we are, and that's hard, really hard when you're doing it from scratch. Is there any tool or particular like technique you use for process documentation and sharing?
The most helpful thing in documenting our own processes was pen and paper. And for this, we had to meet in person. So we flew out our leadership team I think we met in Tijuana. And we did it on a piece of paper and just mapped it out, took pictures of everything, and then properly documented it. But it was really just more of like being able to sit down, having a full day of, I don't think it was one day, I think it was a whole week of process documentation in person, just writing everything down. And then being able to see on the paper where, there were gaps or where we could change things really helped. And then we created essentially what we call the Cápita Works way. And that was really helpful for us. So whenever we need to do some sort of restructuring, that's what we go back to, just traditional pen and paper.
Pen and paper. Nice. I was looking for like a magic bullet.
Right.
Because I struggle with this. Like, I'm with you on all of those steps. And then I'm like, but isn't there like a beautiful little, no, not yet. Not that we know it.
Not yet. And I've started seeing some softwares and platforms online that are developing, and we might even look into that. But even just to start as a base, pen and paper, at least for us, was very helpful. And our whole leadership team is pretty visual. So our processes aren't like, a list 1 through 10. Our processes are this, and then, an arrow leading to this, and looks very beautiful. But
I think that helps.
Pen and paper.
The visuals and your like your background, your visuals on your website and the way you express your Cápita Works way are beautiful. And I think if you're a visual learner, that's a really great way to get out of like, oh, a document with lots of bullets.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not that. And even things like our employee handbook and our onboarding for an internal team, nothing is, a PDF that you have to read. It's all visual and, very colorful. And I think that has really helped. So
wow, that's inspiring. That's really inspiring, actually, for me to think about back-end processes looking as attractive as the visuals for your client-facing process. It's really great. So you're based in Mexico. You grew up in Mexico?
I did. So born and raised here in Tijuana, and I say here in Tijuana because I'm now in Tijuana full time. And border with San Diego. So I grew up going to school in San Diego. So I crossed the border every day my whole life. And then I went to college in New York. That's how I ended up there. But I've kind of always had this kind of two cultures to rely on, Tijuana and San Diego.
I envy that. I think that's fantastic. And what are some things about growing up, living, and even like professional life in Mexico that you imagine the average US or Canadian person has no idea or takes for granted?
That is a great question because most of my professional experience has been in the US. So I would say my first exposure into kind of the Mexican corporate culture was through Cápita Works. So even I have learned a lot through this whole process. But I will say that Mexican people, or if I generalize the Mexican working culture, people are a lot more direct. And that has been something I have found. So there's no, need to read between the lines, very straightforward. Work is work and personal is personal, which is great. But that's one thing that I have learned, definitely.
Fascinating. That also sounds like an opportunity for your US clients too. I'm thinking about myself, like, how can I be a better communicator if that's the more standard style in Mexico? Because I'm not the most direct, linear, or cut and dry communicator at all.
Yeah. One thing that has been very helpful as a leader with our team is to know the personalities of our team members. And we use the Myers-Briggs, and I think you know that from our process, but we use the 16 personalities, and having a full report of what their personality is like really has helped our leadership team develop into, I guess, these better leaders that can communicate with their team. So I would say if you're able to understand how they like to be communicated with or to, I'd say that is super helpful. And hey, even being super open about it and saying, hey, this is how I do things or I expect things to be done, but what is your style of work and what do you expect? I think kind of that back and forth is very helpful.
Yes, I love that. That's really wise. Anything I haven't asked you about Cápita Works or yourself that you want to be sure to share?
I don't think so.
I just love all of these there's a lot of like little lessons and takeaways in here. So I love it. Love it. Thank you. I've been talking to Erika Pichardo-Ley, who's head of client relations at Cápita. Erika, where can people learn more about you and your company?
So people can go on our LinkedIn. You can find us as Cápita Works, or you can go on our website, capitaworks.com. And you'll actually find all the info you need on me on both LinkedIn and our website.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Kennedy Events Podcast. Come back next time and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.